Okay, we're now recording. So our three panelists for our event at this time are Tamar Hassassian, Noor Awad, and Khaled Abu Awad. That is the order in which they will speak. I'm going to say a word to introduce the three of them, and I will do that at the beginning. So Tamar Hassassian is an Armenian Palestinian living in the old city of Jerusalem. She is the mother of two children. After earning her BA in law from Al-Quds University, her journey of seeking for justice began. This journey, with all its chapters, led her to become who she is today. She is a nonviolent resistance activist who works as operational manager for the Tahrir movement. Tahrir movement, that means change in English, is an organization leading the Palestinian national nonviolence movement of grassroots communities and emerging leaders practicing nonviolence as a unifying identity for the Palestinian people. Tahrir builds a democratic and independent communities who have the strength to forge together a Palestinian path of responsibility and self-development. And I should add that although some people think otherwise, there is no formal or operational connection between Tahrir, change on the one hand, and roots on the other hand. Our second speaker is going to be Noor Awad. Many of you have heard from him before. Noor lives in Bethlehem. He is a 28-year-old Palestinian tour guide. He speaks extensively for Roots. He's an activist and a leader of our movement. He's the English language spokesman for Roots. And lastly, we'll speak Khaled Abu Awad. Khaled is the Palestinian co-director of Roots. He's responsible just about for everything that happens on the Palestinian side of Roots. He has a very illustrious career. I'm just going to mute again everyone. Someone's making a little bit of noise there.
Nobody with that. And they're showing that thing with Gary Payton.
And Khaled has been active in the peace movement for about 20 years. He was one of the original members and founders of the Parent Circle, the Bereaved Families Forum. After serving as their Palestinian director for many years, he went on to found a movement called Al-Tariq, the Derech, the Way, that worked in developing the Palestinian nonviolent movement. And for about the past 4 years, he has been the director, the Palestinian director of Roots.
You're so right. Gary Payton is a Hall of Fame player.
I'm going to try again to mute.
Nobody suggested Gary Payton is a top 10 or top 20 player of all time. He was very good. And he wasn't.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to call upon Tamar to speak, and I have to find her on the screen to unmute her. So give me a minute while I look for Tamar on the screen. Tamar, can you raise your, there you are. Okay. I think we can hear you now, Tamar. Good evening. We cannot hear you. Even though I've unmuted you. Let's see. So you've just got muted again. I'm unmuting you again. We still can't hear you. Can anyone hear Tamar? No, we can't hear you. Now we can hear you. You just came. You just arrived.
Okay, good. Okay, great.
You can begin, Tamar.
Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by saying what a Nakba means to me. A Nakba is destitution to me. It means the cancellation of my national identity, being diasporized, losing my geography and my historiography. It is the decimation of the national identity. We talked about, as Hanan mentioned, that it's the annual day of commemoration of the displacement that preceded and followed the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948, which 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled, and hundreds of Palestinian towns and villages were depopulated and destroyed. These refugees and the descendant number several million people now. They were divided into between Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank, and also the Gaza Strip. And another 250,000 internally displaced Palestinians in Israel. The refugee problem is one of the oldest unsettled issues in contemporary history. It is highly complex, emotional, and even explosive. Almost 5 decades, the refugee problem was overshadowed by Arab-Israeli wars over territorial and political issues. Now, with the peace negotiations underway, the question of the refugees has emerged as an integral part of the multilateral talks. Different scenarios have been offered by the parties concerned on how best to resolve this problem. Yet many hurdles lie in the path of just and satisfactory solution. Several pertinent points have been raised in dealing with the refugee problem. There's like an analysis of the absorptive capacity of the West Bank and Gaza, and other implications of a large influx of Palestinians from outside these areas. Assessments of the future transfer of UNRWA functions to the Palestinian National Authority. Consideration of questions regarding naturalization, integration, resettlement, and the long-term residency of Palestinians in their current countries of asylum. Assessment of the relative costs of various options for resolving the refugee problem. The principle of right of return. I would like to say something, a summary of, it's a very, long story, but I would like just to summarize the thing. A major dimension of the negotiations on refugees is the issue of right of return for the Palestinians. The Palestinians in Arab position is rooted in the fact that UN resolution of 914 constitutes the basis of just solution to the refugee problem. An individual's right to return to his or her native country is an integral part of the individual's fundamental rights. In case where people have been forced to leave their countries because of war and hostilities, the right of return is unquestionable. A notable exception is the case of the Palestinian people who were expelled from their country to seek refuge in adjacent Arab lands and were denied the right of return on political grounds. It is important to note that the right of return for Palestinians is originally tied to the national right of self-determination, a principle that is guaranteed by a variety of international instruments. For almost 2 decades or more, the Palestinian question was essentially treated, the Palestinian question was essentially treated as a refugee problem. However, in 1974, the UN General Assembly unequivocally acknowledged the Palestinians' right to self-determination in compliance with the UN Charter and reaffirmed the right of return. This basic human right is at the core of the current Middle East problem. Without a fair and equitable solution to the refugee problem, the Middle East will suffer from continued political instability. I would like to also mention how roots made the Nakba, how the Nakba means to me and how my connection to roots has affected my understanding of this event. The aspiration of the Jews 3,000 years ago and their return basically to the promised land as it is given by God. And if I have to submit to that, then it makes sense to relate to my identity with the right of return, because my people in 1948 were forcefully diasporized as a result of war. 750,000 Palestinians, have left forcibly of Palestine because of the war against them. And now there are 7 million people, second, third generation. The question of right of return to Palestine connects me with the roots of the biblical promises that were given to the Jews as the chosen people to go back to Palestine, which means the land of Canaan, the land of my ancestors. This is what I have to say.
Thank you, Tamar.
You are most welcome.
Thank you, Tamara. شكرا يا تمارا.
عفوا أهلا خالد.
We'll have opportunity to ask Tamar questions after Noor and Khaled speak.
Yes, of course.
I'm going to now try to unmute Noor. I guess I have to find him on the screen to do that. So I am looking for Noor. I found Noor. Okay, I found Noor. I found Noor. But now I lost him again.
Didn't find him. Where do you find him?
Noor is not with us?
I cannot see him.
So if that's so, we'll go on to Khaled, and hopefully Noor will join us afterwards. So Khaled, please.
Yes, good. First, thank you. That I'm so happy to see that we have around 100 people here. That's amazing, and that's good. Good evening, everybody. On this holy month, Ramadan, first of all, God bless all of us and everyone all over the world. My name is Khaled Abu Awad. I'm a Palestinian, I'm a Muslim, I'm an Arab. I'm living here in the West Bank in a village called Tamar. Beit Umar, it's in the region of Hebron, in between Gush Etzion and Hebron. And me and Rav Hanan and Shaul, we are part of the leadership of Roots nowadays. And Roots is part of what we as a family, Abu Awad's family, we used to deal with the last 20 years because of our rich history of the conflict and with the situation here. My story or my family story with this conflict start since 1948. We as a family, originally, we are from Kubebe. Kubebe is a Palestinian village. They call it nowadays Lachish. I think all of you know Lachish. It's close to Kiryat Gad. So from there, my parents left the village in 1948. I remember when I talked with my father and with my uncles and in the family and the old people in my family, they told me that we left the village and we thought that we are going to be back in a couple of days, 3-4 days. We will be back. So we took a few things just with us for 3-4 days. And we've been waiting for the situation to come down and then come back to our home. And since that day until now, none of us returned back. I'm living here, part of our family in Beit Umar, part of our family living in El Fawar refugee camp, part of our family living in Kalandia refugee camp, part of our family living in Balata refugee camp in Nablus, and the majority of our family living in Jordan. And of course, part in Syria, part in Lebanon. Nowadays, we are we are a big family. We became a huge family because in 1948 in my village, we used to count around 900 or 9,800 people. Nowadays, we are around 22,000 people. Me as Khaled, my brother Ali, my brother Yusuf, and Fadi, my sister Siham, my sister Maha, we are living here. My brother Muhammad, my brother Jamal, my sister Zahira, Saadiya, Fatima, they are living in Jordan. My brother Jamil live in Holland. So the same family, we are divided. So most of the people of our village, Abu Awad's family, the big family, are more divided. Some of us in the United States, some in Europe, some in Jordan nowadays. So I remember I grown in Beit Umar, and as a child of the family, the second generation after the Nakba, I start asking myself why I am living here in Beit Umar as a minority, 4 or 5 people, my father, our mother, me, and another 3 brothers living in Beit Umar. In everything, my father to tell us, don't make problems with the people. We are few, we are minority, living in between big families here. And that's coming in my mind all the time. When we went to school, like most of the kids there, they are they have a relationship. They are from the same family, and I am from a small family, a one house. Like I have only one brother. Every one of them have brothers, have uncles, brothers, and they all one part. And I'm alone. I feel all the time. And you start thinking, why? Who caused me this? Why I'm like this? Where's my house? Where's our land? We rent a house. We have no lands. We have nothing. And my father work just to bring us food. So I grown with a lot of hatred to those who cause us to be like this, to be a refugee family. In my eyes, they took my grandfather's house, which is my house, should be our land. My grandfather have 600 dunams in Kubebe. I have no 1 meter nowadays. I lost all this piece of land. Everything we have to do from the beginning. To buy a land, to work, to have money, to pay for the land, to build a house, to do everything, depending on ourselves from nothing, from the zero. So I grown like this until 1987. 1987, some of you remember the beginning of the Intifada, the first Palestinian Intifada. When the Intifada started, it's for us and for me, for my family, for my brother. It's like the opportunity to fight the side who caused us to suffer all the days of our life, which is Israel, the Israel people, the Jewish people. They are our first enemy. We have to fight them. So we as became part of the leadership of the Intifada, and we start the demonstration and also spreading brochures, programs, arrange everything about the Intifada, to give the orders to the shops to close, to the people who go to work when they cannot in the days that there's no work, the work is off, a kind of the demonstration of the Palestinian people against the occupation. And that caused to most of us in the family to be arrested by Israel. Our mother arrested and spent 6.5 years in the Israel jail. I spent 1.5 years. My brother also, Ali, spent 4 years. My sister Siham spent 1 year. Until 1993. 1993, when the first peace agreement had been signed between us as the Palestinian, represented by the PLO and Yasser Arafat, with Israel, we as a family, and we politically as part of the Fatah movement, we support the agreement, and we look to the agreement like we fight, we win, now we will what we dream about, what we look about, which is the dream of any simple Palestinian to live in freedom and dignity, to end this occupation, to move without expecting in every kilometer that there is a checkpoint, to sleep without fearing that the military will come to your house in the middle of the night and walking you up and arrested you. All these behaviors, it's like in our eyes, the result of the peace agreement in our mind that is going to be changed. We will not see our villages and cities. This is the simple meaning of the peace agreement in the mind of the simple people. I remember my first facing with the agreement it's around 1.5 months when I went to Hebron. I went to Hebron to the bank to do some work, and in my way in between Hebron and Halhul, there's a bridge, the entrance of the Hebron city. I've seen around 500 or 600 Palestinian cars standing there. So I said, what's going on here? What's happened? They said there's an Israel checkpoint in the entrance of Hebron. I said, what? Where is the peace? What they are doing? Why they still making a checkpoint? What's the reason? They said someone throw stones on Road 60, and as a result of this, the Israel army closed the city of Hebron. And then I start thinking, where is the peace? What's the meaning of the agreement that we have? Is it a bullshit thing or it's a real thing? Because nothing changed on the ground in my mind, in my life. So we continue. I start thinking about the agreement, and I said, of course, it cannot be changed immediately. It needs a time. I can understand this. This is what I say to myself. So we have to be patient. We have to wait. The thing will be changed step by step. We should wait in a patient. So I do like this. My family do like this. We are waiting for the peace, and we stop be act in any political things. Like we start caring about ourselves. We have been participating in the Intifada for more than 6 years or 7 years. This has damaged us from all the sides. Like we have to return and to study, to go back to the university, to the school. We have to go back to work and to raise our economic situation and start looking about ourselves, caring about ourselves. So we start working. I start working seriously. I build a big company, a very, very big company. I became a serious businessman with more than 360 workers working for me, and watching the situation around me, the suicide bomber in Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, and what's happened in the West Bank, the house demolition, the arrest of the people, shooting the people for any simple reason, and I still have hope that this will be changed until the 16th of November 2000. The 16th of November 2000, when an Israeli military group entered to the village of Beit Umar, and they shot my brother Yusuf, 31 years old, in the entrance of Beit Umar. Yusuf do nothing. He just drive his car, and the military group asked him to stop the car, to shut down the engine. He do all what they ask him to do, and he wait on his car. And you know, the kids of Beit Umar, they still throwing stone on the army. So my brother went out of his car and asked the people of Beit Umar, the kids from Beit Umar, will you please stop throwing stone, not to protect the soldier, to protect his car, because the stones is coming up to the car, and they damage the car. So they respect Yusuf because they respect Abu Awad's family, because they know that Abu Awad's family care about the Palestinian nationality, the Palestinian rights and everything, and they respect us. So they stop. One of the soldiers in there became very angry. He started taking stones and throwing stones to my brother's car, which make Yusuf went out of his car again and asked the soldier, will you stop? And here the soldier start moving to his direction in an angry way, and saying a bad thing, a bullshit thing, and start crying on Yusuf, and until he became close to Yusuf, he put his gun on the head of my brother and he shot. He killed Yusuf, and our life in the family became again facing a challenge, a tragedy, something new, far away from all the conflict, and something bring us and throw us in the center of the conflict again. It's like this is our destiny. We have no choice. We have to face this, or to be. We didn't know how to react. We didn't know at that moment, should happen here? Where's the peace? Why Yusuf killed? Who killed Yusuf? Why he killed him? A lot of things, a lot of questions in your mind, and also the people start to come to our house, sharing us our pain. Thousands of people. When we took Yusuf to Likvor to
be buried,
to bury him, it's one of the biggest demonstration that we have in I think more than 4,000 or 5,000 walk with us to bury him. So after that, we start a serious discussion in our family like what's happened, where we are going. Also, a lot of people came to us to address us. This is their opportunity. Like those people, they didn't understand what's the meaning of peace. They are talking about the Jewish people, the Israel people. They don't want peace. The only thing, language that they can understand is the violent language. We should fight them. We should not give up. Stop believing in the peace agreement. Stop support those who call us to be part of the peace process. Go back to fight. Go back to resist against this occupation. This is what the people start talking with us about. But we as a family, me as a son of the family, a brother of Yusuf, I have been in a situation I hear from this and from this, from everywhere, and I have no decision where to go, what's the direction, what's the right thing, peace, war, revenge, give up. I don't know. Until we got an invitation to join a group of bereaved family that they want to come to our home to share us our pain, to bring their solidarity and sorry about what's happened to my brother, which look strange, like what they want from us, why they want to come to us, what make them think to visit us. They are our enemy. For me, for us, all the Jewish people, all the Israel people are guilty. They all killed my brother. They all guilty. So I don't want to see any one of them. I don't want to talk with any one of them, all of them. But this group want to come to me and most of the family, we refuse to host them. Our mother have a different opinion. She said, what else can happen to us? Yusuf, he passed away. He's not here. And those people, we don't know, maybe they will bring us something new, a hope, a miracle, we don't know. Let's listen to them and see what they want. We host them, they came to our home, and they look nice people. They talk in a very good way. They speak their stories, they start telling their stories. One of them, she's a mother from Telmont. She speak about her 14 or 13 years old daughter. Her daughter have been killed in a suicide bomber in Dizengoff Center. And the mother and the father have sitting in our house telling the story how their daughter came back from the school, the end of the year, and went with another two friends of her to celebrate of the year of the school in Tel Aviv. And instead of coming back with a smile and happiness, they got their daughter body killed. Why? Who killed their daughter? In the name of whom they killed her daughter? These questions start in my head, and I start thinking about her story and my story, her daughter and my brother, and that brings me to the general situation that we all living in, which means that I thought before that I am the victim, I'm the only victim, and I am the one who suffer, and the other side live in a paradise. I paid a high price every day, and the other side is celebrate and live in a very good life. Maybe some of these of this is right, but not all of this is not the whole fact. The real fact that this situation affects all of us in a bad way. We all paying a high price as a result of no peace, as a result of this conflict. And most of us both very thirsty to have a solution, to have a change that can make us sleep without fear, live without fear, decide without fear, feel a little bit secure. So, since that meeting, me and the whole family, we start to believe that the thing between the two people of us is the most powerful thing that can change us, change the things that we have in our mind, all the image, the picture that we save in our mind, everyone about the other, like who is the Jewish people, who's the Israel people. Every one of us hear things when we grown as a kids, and from the reality. For me, as a refugee, as a son of a refugee family, when I think about my grandfather and his house and his land and my village or my grand's village, all these things I collect and I make the image of the other one in a very bad way. The image is represent a monster. The meeting is the most powerful thing that can change this, because you're asking the people on the other side, who are you? What do you want? Who am I in your mind? I have been for 3 years in the Bereaved Family Forum, part of the educational group, and then I became the manager of the forum, the co-manager of the forum for 6 years. And then we established a Palestinian movement called The Way Al-Tariq. The Way Al-Tariq is a movement that focuses on the youth in the Palestinian area with the message of reconciliation and a peace. We reach thousands of people and families, and we continue to Tahir and to roots and what we are doing nowadays. Thank you.
Khaled, we'd like you
Yes.
to add a little bit about the Nakba, to be specifically relate specifically to the Nakba.
All what I spoke is about the Nakba. This is the history of the Nakba. This is I'm not discussing the Nakba from the political side. I'm talking about the Nakba as a person, a son of a family, of a refugee family who lived the Nakba in his life. The Nakba is part of my life. The Nakba is to find yourself first, losing your first house, land, as someone strange in a village, to lose your second house, to lose and to start for the third time to build the third house, and every time from the zero. This is the Nakba. The Nakba is to live here, and your brother in Jordan, or your brother in Holland, or the rest of the family is living out. You know, I have 3 sisters in Jordan. I think we haven't been met for 5 years or 6 years, more than 6 years, and I didn't see any one of them. It's like they are my sister, they are my brothers, and they have kids, their sons, and their grand. For me, it's like I don't. I'm nothing with them. I don't remember them. I don't know. I don't know how they look nowadays. Their kids, how is their life? If I need help, they are not here. They are far away from me. If they need me, I'm far away from them. It's like the Nakba is divide us. It cut us as a family. The same family, the brothers, the sisters.
Thank you, Khaled.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you. I'm here for any question, but I think Noor is here now also.
We'll have Noor Awad speak. I introduced Noor earlier. And after Noor speaks, we can ask questions of the three participants. So Noor, you're unmuted. You can speak.
Hi, Hanan.
Hello, Noor.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. It's a very weird time in this pandemic and in the quarantine. Things are, I think, getting a little bit better here where I live. I live in Bethlehem, which is south of Jerusalem. My name is Noor, and I'm a member of Roots, Shurashim, Judur, the Israeli-Palestinian Initiative for Dialogue here in the area of Gush Etzion and Bethlehem. And of course, today I want to talk about the Nakba. I want to thank Tamar and Khaled for what they shared with us, with their stories and about the Nakba and about the topic. As you all, of course, realize, I did not live that time. I didn't live in 1948. I was born in 1991. So I'm going to talk about my personal story in relation to the Nakba, in the relation to what happened in 1948 and how it affected my life, and my family, and my personal story. So I was born in Amman in Jordan in 1991 for a Palestinian family, of course. My father and my mother, they were born in Bethlehem. My family originally came from a village in southwest of Jerusalem called Malha. Malha is just a few miles away from Jerusalem. It's about 3 miles away from north of Bethlehem, northwest of Bethlehem. And my family lived there for generations, for many, many generations, until 1948. Now, in 1948, my family, like many other families, especially in the area of west of Jerusalem, because of the battles and the fights, they had to leave their homes. And what they think that it will be just temporary. And they were looking for a shelter. They were looking for a safe area, which they found in a refugee camp that was established by the UN. And it's located in north of Bethlehem, in north of the city of Bethlehem. So they went to the refugee camp. And when I say my family, I'm not only talking about my grandparents, I'm talking about extended family. I'm talking about most of the people of the village. We are talking here about 2,500 people who lived in Malha in 1948. Some of these people who even actually were afraid, were scared from this war and from the violence that surrounded them. So they decided even to move far away, and they went to Jordan. At the same time, my grandfather, who stayed in the refugee camp, after 2 years, after the war and after the many ceasefires that happened, he realized that he's not going anytime soon back to Malha. So he kind of started settling down in Bethlehem, but he didn't want to settle down in the refugee camp. So after 2 years in the refugee camp, my grandfather, he decided to leave the refugee camp, and he did live. And when I say he left, I mean he just moved out of the refugee camp to the city, to live in the city of Bethlehem, where he rented a house from an old lady here in Bethlehem. And my grandfather worked back then as a stonemason, and he was the sheikh, the cleric that's responsible for Umar Mosque here in Bethlehem, in the city. So my parents, as I said, we are both born here in Bethlehem. My father was born in 1957. My mother was born in 1964. And both of my parents at some point decided to move abroad, to move away, especially during the 80s, and when the situation here was, it didn't promise or show that there would be any hope for them to establish a future here. It started with my father, who actually wanted to go to Europe, but he stayed in Jordan for a while. And then my mother followed him, and they got married there. And that's how I was born there. In 1995, when I was about 5 years old, and after 2 years that the Oslo Accords were signed, my family decided to move back to Palestine. And they were able to do so. And when I say to move back, that means to the area of the West Bank, of course, where they were born and where they lived. So we moved back here to Bethlehem, where the rest of our extended family is living. And I came back here, and I remember living the first years in Bethlehem, what I usually call it a normal life. I mean, at such a young age, I didn't really knew a lot about the conflict. I didn't felt that I am facing the conflict when I came back, even though I have stories from childhood still about like conflict. I always remember that story that my father told, that when we were traveling back to Bethlehem as a family, of course, we had to cross the borders, which is still controlled by Israel. I'm talking about the Allenby Bridge. And it was a phenomena at the time, after even Oslo Accords were signed, that the Israeli intelligence would take some Palestinians for questioning before they let them in the West Bank. And one of the officers actually took my father for a questioning, and my father took me with him. And I was young, but my father actually always tell me the story that this officer, he actually offered my father to work with him, to work for him, to work for Israeli intelligence, to report for them. But my father refused. And even though I was like very young back then, and I didn't really understood the conversation, but I felt the tense between my father and between this Israeli officer. And my father said that I actually cursed the officer. I shouted at him and I cursed him. Anyhow, we came back here, and I want to say that we lived as a normal life. Before that was before the second Intifada. I'm talking about the years between 1995 and 2000. And I remember my father working in Jerusalem. My father is a plumber, so he did a lot of like work in Jerusalem area especially, and sometimes he was taking me with him. And every Friday, me and my brother and my father, we have to go for the Friday prayer in Al-Aqsa Mosque at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That was like every Friday thing. Of course, you had to cross the checkpoint from Bethlehem to get to Jerusalem, but it was not anything like the checkpoint now, so I don't really remember it. I don't really remember stucking at a checkpoint. It was just like an open road, and there was no walls, and it was kind of freedom for me. And it was easy to go to Jerusalem. So soon the Intifada will start, the second Intifada will start, and that affected the way how I lived here. And it affected my experience and the way how I see things. The Intifada started when I was at the age of almost 11 years old. And I started to become more aware about where I'm living and who am I and what's happening to me. And if I want to talk about the Nakba, then I think that the first information I got about the Nakba was from my mother. Having discussions like, asking her like questions, where we are from, and what does Malha mean, and why we don't go back there, and where is it, and all of these kind of questions. And I think that when usually it comes to talk about 1948 and what happened, unlike many Palestinian families, in my family, it was kind of a taboo, I would call it. or maybe taboo is not the best word to describe it, but it was not really a topic that we usually discuss, even on the 15th of May in 1948. And we never like sat on a dinner table talking about what happened in 1948. And I would like only ask my mother some questions and she would just answer it very briefly. And back then, I didn't really understood why. I didn't really thought a lot about it. And I start to hear from, of course, other friends, other kids in my age about their stories and their families and what happened. And in the school, of course, when I say in the school, I mean here in a Palestinian school. I learned the Palestinian curriculum. In our school, the topic of the Nakba is a very powerful topic. It was a very powerful topic. We had to study about it. Of course, we study about the history of Palestine and the history of our people and all of that. And we start to study about the Nakba as a very important, as an essential element to be considered for Palestinian nationalism, for the Palestinian national identity. What does it mean and how it affected us and how it affected shaping the Palestinian identity. So from there, I start to kind of like dig deep in what happened and realize more about who I am, kind of discovering part and a very important part of my identity, that I am a Palestinian, but I'm also a refugee. And there is a place that I belong to here in Palestine. I belong to Palestine, but there is a specific place where I and my family and the history of my family belongs to this place. And I started to identify myself when someone asked me, where are you from? And I usually don't answer first that I am from Bethlehem or I live in Beit Sahur, which is in Bethlehem. I start to say that I'm originally from Jerusalem. I'm from Malha. And then I say where I actually live now. And it was kind of, for me, it was a way to reveal my real identity, to insist on this is who I am. Because, you know, the question of what the catastrophe in 1948 means to you is a very big question. There are many things to say about. But one of the things that stuck with me, and it was like kind of emotionally triggering when Hanan read a little bit about in the Wikipedia from about 1948. This is a story of ethnic cleansing. And I'm not here debating ethnic cleansing in an intellectual way, and what actually happened and what were the intentions and what the geopolitical challenges and the issues that existed and the wars. But I got the sense and the feeling in this story of us, of the Palestinian Nakba, of what happened, the story of that someone, there is this side, there is this thing that tried and is still trying to erase our identity. And I have to fight back. And when I say I fight back, I mean by preserving my identity, by holding into it, by steadfasting. That's why I start to identify myself in the way that I mentioned. And that's how the Nakba kind of became a very important part of who I am. Another layer I want to kind of add here in order to clarify maybe the dynamic of one of the dynamics of the Palestinian society. We are all Palestinians, and the majority of my people suffered from the events in 1940. All of my people suffered from the events that happened in 1947, 1948. About 60%, I think, from the Palestinian people are who were basically dislocated, whether today they still live inside what became Israel or the West Bank or Gaza or even outside abroad in the neighboring Arab countries or in Europe and America. But those people, especially the descendants of refugees in the refugee camp, we always felt the responsibility to basically resist, to try to change what happened to our ancestors, and that we are somehow inheriting this idea, inheriting this identity from previous generations. I think if someone of the participants here have ever made it to any Palestinian city or any Palestinian place, probably he or she would saw emblems or signs of the Palestinian, of the key that represents the right of return. The keys that were actually keys of homes, of real homes that existed, and that parents handed them over to their kids, and their kids, when they grow, they will hand them over to their kids, and it's became like a generational thing. So in a way, I felt like I have a saying, and I have a very powerful saying in Palestinian national movement, in the Palestinian national identity for the Palestinian people. When I talk about my story, when I talk about myself, I represent all of my people in that way. However, the second Intifada had even a worse effect on the way how I see Nakba, because it was actually the first time that I had a real confrontation with Israelis as an enemy. So until then, all of what I heard was about history that my family kind of decided to put it behind their backs in a way. And my family was not really active politically. And as I said, we didn't really talk a lot about the events of 1948. And until the second Intifada, like, yeah, my family was not really politically active. I never actually remember that I ever, for example, like participated in any of the events of commemoration of the Nakba. You know, of course, when the 15th of May each year happens, there's like all those activities in the schools and in the refugee camps. But I participated in a few of those, and I didn't really feel that I'm an active or I'm participating in such things. However, the second Intifada started, and as I said, that was a confrontation with the enemy. This enemy that's part of my identity, that's part of the story that I carry with me. Now I'm facing them in reality. And I'm especially talking about the year 2002, when the Church of Nativity fell besieged by the Israeli military. I had cousins who were inside the church. Of course, the city of Bethlehem was also besieged, and there were curfews for more than 40 days, 41 days exactly. And it was a time of war. That's how I remember that time, and seeing for the first time is actually Israeli soldiers coming to my city, and seeing, you know, Israeli tanks and all of that. And I'm mentioning this story to just keep in mind that, you know, the Intifada, in a way, on one hand, I saw the Intifada as like what happened in 2000, and because of the failure of the peace talks and all of the reasons that actually launched the Intifada. But at the same time, it's just another chapter of this story, of this misery, of this suffering that we as Palestinian people are living. And it's my time now, and this is the suffering that I face. So it was with my grandparents who had to leave their village, and the catastrophe in 1948. My father was born after the war on Egypt. My mother was born 3 years before the 6 Days War, and when the 6 Days War happened, of course, my family were affected by 1960, 1967, and 1973, and all of this history of wars. And so now this is my time, and this is just another chapter of the ongoing catastrophe that we are living as Palestinians. And I start to look at it in a way that I kind of like feel what Khaled says here, because this is the emotional part about the Nakba, is that you feel that everything is happening in your life at this moment as a Palestinian living in Palestine has somehow connection to what happened in 1948. And that our life is never going to get normal until we fix this mistake that happened in 1948. And when I say a mistake, one of the understandings of what happened in 1948 is that there is something went wrong in history. We study our identity, we study our history, our culture, and we feel as people, and we feel that we have a strong connection as people, and we have a strong connection to this land. And that by 1948, when the British mandate left Palestine, there should be Palestine, there should be a country, there should be our homeland, and we should have freedom. But rather we fall in under another occupation. That's how many of us feel. And it's another chapter of many occupations that we are in Palestine. And of course, different people look at in history in different ways from different lenses, how they relate to the British mandate era, how they relate to the Ottoman era, how they relate to the Egyptian era here in Palestine in different way. But like that's in general how everyone feels that 1948, 15th of May 1948, when the last British soldiers left the soil of Palestine, something wrong happened here. However, I came in 2014. After I finished my high school, actually, a few years after that, and I decided to become a tour guide. And becoming a tour guide was actually a choice that I made for two reasons. One is that because I actually spoke English, and that will make it easier for me to apply and to become a tour guide here in Bethlehem. And two was because I was already kind of practice guiding. All of you know Bethlehem is the birth town of Jesus, and it has the Church of Nativity. And many tourists comes to the city of Bethlehem each year. About 3 million tourists visit the city of Bethlehem. And I have the chance to meet these tourists who, the vast majority of them are interested in coming to see the birthplace of Jesus. But a small minority of them are also curious about the situation now, are also curious about what we call it the living stones, the people who live here. Who are they? What they are doing? What's their story? And more than that, of course, when I talk about 2014, that's during the war in Gaza, 2015, these years, and the rise of the BDS around many campuses around the world, and especially in Europe and the US. And many questions now started about like the Palestinian story and the Palestinian situation. So I found myself there naturally at the front lines with meeting foreigners, talking to them about the situation that we live. Why do we have a wall? Why do we have settlements? What happened in 67? What happened in 1948? And so many of these conversations that basically happened. And these conversations were very important to me because it was the first time that I expressed my feelings, my thoughts, and my knowledge about what happened in 1948 to other people. And I was asked to talk about it openly. And I had different arguments. I had people who were coming to learn. I had people who were coming to argue and bringing all of kinds of arguments. Why Palestinians are still considered to be refugees until now, even after 3 generations. Why your people are still living in refugee camps. Why your people want to destroy Israel. Many questions and many arguments I had to face as a descendant and of a refugee, and as someone who carries the refugee story, and as a Palestinian. And I was going through all of these conversations and arguments, sometimes intellectually and many times emotionally as well. I couldn't separate it, and I have to face all of these, and I saw myself kind of like educating people about it. But it was always with internationals, people who don't have necessarily like a direct connection to the conflict. I did not have a conversation with an Israeli about it. I never heard about an Israeli talking about it, but I heard the arguments of Israelis from foreigners. Arguments like denying what happened, denying maybe numbers, denying that massacres happened, and all of that. So it happened that in 2016, I found about Roots and I decided to join Roots. And one of the most powerful moments was when I met Hanan, and Hanan was talking about his personal story. And he talked about this recognition that we as Palestinians and Israelis, we owe for each other. And that's the real path to reconciliation will be through empathy and recognition, that we as people, we have to recognize each other. And before that, I had plenty of actually conversations with Israeli settlers, with Israeli left-wing activists, with Israeli right-wing activists. At least I hear them online, and I hear them on behalf of, like, I hear them through other people. And there was always this denial of the suffering that my people faced. I will not be exaggerating if I said that it was the first or the second time that I hear an Israeli person. Actually, it was the second time, because the first person who I heard talking about the catastrophe of 1948 and how should we deal with it was Ilan Pappé, the Israeli new historian, activist, whatever you wanna call him here. It was a bit controversial when he actually, I think, he delivered a lecture about the Nakba. It was in May 2012 or 2013. I'm not sure about about the time, but it happened, and there was a huge discussion here in Bethlehem. Are we listening to this guy telling the story of what happened, and especially with his history and who he is and his identity? And then the important thing that I listened for the first time to Hanan, who actually talked about it with recognition. And that opened up something inside me, because until that moment, I was not able to really feel or understand or try to understand the other side of the story, which is I learned before that. I learned the story of the Israelis. I learned the history of the Zionist movement. I learned, of course, the history of the Jewish people. I learned the history of many other people who faced massacres and who faced ethnic cleansing, but nothing really emotionally connected to me as much as my story. Nothing really meant as much as to me as my people's story. At that moment, when Hanan talked about it with recognition, there is something that basically changed inside me. And I felt I have to understand the other side and what they are talking about and their story. Now, the question of the Nakba is really remain an unanswered question. And I remember that in one of the times that I was actually speaking in Roots, at Roots actually, to a group. I'm not sure if it was Hanan or Shaul, but some of us actually, or at that time, we had a group of young Israelis. Or to be more accurate, it was a group of young American Jews, and they had some Israeli staff with them. On that group, it was in 2017, the group asked me about my personal story and where I came from and where is Malha, and if I ever had the chance to go back to Malha and see it, since that I have a permission now and I can cross the checkpoint here in Bethlehem and travel toward Jerusalem. So did I ever actually went to Malha? And actually I did. I went to Malha, and this girl that asked me, I was trying to answer her question, and I told her that I went to Malha. Malha today is a neighborhood in southwest of Jerusalem. Some of the houses of the village, including the mosque, actually still there. Unlike many villages that was totally destroyed, but you can still actually see the core of the village of Malha, especially when you are traveling on the road nearby. It's a Begin Boulevard. It's in the area southwest of Jerusalem. So I said that yes, I went there, and I mentioned the story of that my mother actually just told me back then, and she said that your grandfather, before he died, he actually told us the story that he went back to Malha and he visited. Between 1949 and 1967, it was impossible to cross the borders from the West Bank, where Jordan was occupying the West Bank, to go to Israel, so to see Malha. And the green line was exactly drawn between Bethlehem in that time and between Malha. But after 1967, now my grandfather can actually physically go and visit Malha, and he did. But he never told this story before until he almost was about to die. And he said that he went to the village and he went to his house. And he found his house is still there. And there was an Iraqi Jewish family living in the house. And how he knew that, he actually knocked on the front door and they opened and they received him. And in Malha, the Israeli government back in the 50s decided that many of the Iraqi Jewish families who fled Iraq because of what happened in 1948 and because of violence, or because of they were invited or called upon to come to Israel by the Israeli government. So many of the Iraqi Jewish families actually came to, and they were the government decided to give them houses in Malha. So my grandfather, he visited his house, he sat with the family, and he left. I don't know what happened. I don't know what conversation they had. I don't know, because he didn't say, they didn't really told the details of the story. And when I mentioned this story, one of the audience got very emotional, and she was the Israeli staff of the group. And she said that she actually comes from Malha. Her family is Iraqi Jewish, and she lives in Malha. And with all of the tears in her eyes, she asked me the question, will ever there will be peace between us? Will we ever see peace between our people? Will we live this peace? And back then I was overwhelmed by the moment and by the surreality of what's happening, of what I'm living through and what I'm experiencing. And the question for me is, the question of peace is connected to the question of justice. Will there be justice? And when I ask for justice, I'm not asking for the justice of my people. I'm asking for the justice of all people who suffered, of Jewish people who suffered, of Palestinian people who suffered, of other people who are suffering. So for me, that's the question. The question of peace is the question of justice. And when we see the events that's happening now, especially here in the Israeli-Palestinian, of course, talking about the Israeli-Palestinian situation and the conflict here, the plans of annexation, the expansion of settlements, the unclear future of what's going to happen here, and it feels like we are going from bad to worse, then that's what we feel as a continuous Nakba. Maybe I'm not very connected anymore to the date itself, the 15th of May 1948 or 1948, or the 15th of May of each year. I don't feel that this specific date today means a lot to me. I think about all of what happened in 1948 and in 1947 and before that. And I try to learn about the two stories, each story, and how people felt and how people basically behaved and what they did on both sides. So yeah, I wish there will be justice, and then there will be peace. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Noor, very, very much. Thank you to all the panelists. We heard some very, very important and deep emotional truths and understanding and experiences. In the chat box, there's lots and lots of questions. Many of them get us into areas of political disagreements that are important, and I don't want to dodge them, but we only have another 6 or 7, 8 minutes here. I noticed one question that is isolated. It's not getting us into those very important, deep, large issues of politics and what does justice mean. I see that Robin asked about relationships between Palestinians who suffered from the Nakba and now live in refugees, wherever that may be, among other Palestinians who are living where they've been for tens or hundreds of years. She's asking about tensions, I think, and relationships between the different Palestinians. I'm looking for a question here. Yeah, she told us, is there jealousy between the Palestinians who are where they've always been? On the other hand, no, I'm sorry. She's asking jealousy or relationships between Palestinians who are now in Israel, who were born in the areas that became Israel, were never uprooted, as opposed to Palestinians who did become refugees. I'm sorry that I got the question wrong. Would anyone of our panelists, Tamar or Noor or Khaled, want to relate to that question of jealousies between Palestinians? I'm trying to unmute Tamar.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I'll unmute Tamar while Noor is talking.
Yeah, I just want to kind of like correct something here in a way. Even Palestinians who are living today inside Israel, who have Israeli citizenship, there were many of them who were dislocated. They are like internal refugees who lived in certain villages, and they had to leave their villages to the big cities like Nazareth, like Haifa. There are many refugees from around Haifa who live today in Haifa, and they have no ability today to go back to their villages because it doesn't exist anymore. And many of their belongings, many of their like lands and houses and everything was confiscated by the state under the absentee, the laws of absentee, or the absentee law in the 1951, 1952. The question of jealousy, I think, yeah, there is like to a certain limit, this jealousy, but not in a bad way. I never experienced it in the bad way. But of course, any Palestinian who's living outside of Palestine, he or she will tell you that one of his ultimate or her ultimate dreams is to come back to Palestine, at least to visit, to be able to visit Palestine. And of course, he's jealous or she is jealous of the people the Palestinians who are able to live there today. I never personally experienced it in a negative way. In the first years, there was, of course, a social economical difference in the first few decades. You can even say between Palestinians who live in the refugee camps and Palestinians who live in the city. And you can still get that tone and feel this even today when some people in the city here in Bethlehem talk about the refugee camps, and some people in the refugee camps talk about the people of the city. But for sure, at the end of the day, we all have the feeling as Palestinians that we all lost in 1948. Even if someone did not directly lost a land or a family member or like a house, that we all lost a home. We all lost a homeland in 1948. So that's definitely, I think, how the vast majority of people feel about it.
Tamar, would you like to relate to the question? I'm trying to unmute Tamar. Tamar, are you unmuted? I'm sorry that I'm unable to unmute Tamar. Give me a moment. Looks like we've lost Tamar. Khaled, would you like to relate to the question that was brought up?
The question of between the Palestinians themselves. I think we have it in a negative and in a positive way. We still have it. This is a kind of something, a social thing. We as a part of the Arab nation, the structure of the society is a family structure. And the protect of the one became from the family. So it depends. When you live in a village, a minority in between a huge families, the reaction of the people in everything, and you know, the life is contain problems from time to time between children, between people, and when the situation is normal, you cannot see this. When anything happened, when any problem happened, you will find this, like there will be divide. The families stand together and you have to stand in front of them. And it's happened to us many times and to others. I remember also, we are living very close to Al Arub refugee camp. And I remember when I'm a student, and I've seen the people in my age from Al Arub camp went out in between the Beit Umar land with their book studying and cutting fruits and grapes and this from here and from there, and how the people stand there and pet them, and you know, and they feel that they have no land, they have no like it's. But still, for me, I've seen in the question one of the participants took my speech in a way that if it means that he opened a discussion about the right of the Israel state, the exist of the Israel state, and I don't think the discussion here is is about the exist of the Israel state. Israel state is already exists, and it's a fact. It's stupid to deny the right of the Israel to exist. For me, as a Muslim, I have no problem with this. For me, Jewish people, Israel people, Christian people, we all the same religion in my eyes and in my religion. It's like we are not far away from each other. But the question is, the Israel people got their right to establish and to start their independent state. And we, as a Palestinian people, we are standing on the station, waiting where we are going, where to go. This is the main question. To continue living under this occupation is not a choice. This is not what we want. I faced this when I'm a child, when a soldier, when a checkpoint stopped me when I travel in the bus, and he asked me for my identity, and I have been 15 and a half years old, and I said I have no idea because I'm still a child. He said, you are a liar, and he bit me, and he took me, and he bring me out of the bus, and he asked the driver, go from here, and he asked me to go home walking to Beit Ummah, from Gush Etzion to Beit Ummah. I didn't lie, the soldier. I tell the fact, and he react to me in a bad way. Why? Because I am a Palestinian. I remember when I said one day to the soldier in the checkpoint, Boker Tov, good morning. He said, what, good morning? Am I your friend? Bring me your ID and close your mouth. It's like, this is the question. You, the Israel army, the Israel, just before 2 days, I drive my car in Gush Etzion. The blue police is standing on the junction, and he is waiting. We have been 5 cars, 4 Israel cars, and 1 Palestinian cars is me. He's waiting until the 4 Israel cars pass, and then he stands on the middle of the street. Stop. He came to me. I said, you are not a policeman. You are a bad man. I'm looking to you, waiting for me, just because I'm a Palestinian. Listen, this is the occupation. This is what we refuse. This is not a choice. We should change this. We cannot accept to live like this. We have the right to live in dignity and freedom, and we will not give us our right. So, and that doesn't mean that we are asking to destroy the Israel state. The Israel state is our neighbor. The Israel people, I have hundreds of Israel people, they are my friend, and some of them close to me more than my brothers. It's like we as a nation, we want a solution. Maybe in history there's no Palestinian state. Maybe, yes. But there's a Palestinian people. And we as Palestinian people, we want to live in dignity and freedom.
Thank you very, very much, Khaled.
Thank you.
Very powerful and important way to end. We do have to end now, though there's so much more to say. I will take 2 or 3 minutes to close. Many of you in the chat box had questions of what is the future? What is our vision for the future? What is the Palestinian vision of the future? The right of return, a Palestinian state, 1 state, 2 state. So we're not going to deal with that today, but I do want to tell everyone that just a few hours ago, I arranged that the event, our once a week Zoom event on June 1st will deal with those questions. On June 1st, Monday night, we're going to host a Palestinian and Israeli representative of the Land for All movement, also called 2 States, 1 Homeland, and they're going to present their vision for a political solution for the future. Now, of course, the two states, one homeland movement. The Land for All movement is not Roots, but they have a close relationship to Roots. Many Roots members believe in and are connected to the work they're doing. Roots works people to people, grassroots, with identity, with religion, with understanding, whereas Two States, One Homeland movement, the Land for All movement, you can say translates our work, the Roots work, into a political solution. We'll hear from them on June 1st, on Monday night. Let's close by telling everyone that next week we have our event on May 18th at 9 p.m. Monday night, Roots Youth Talking, Palestinian Israeli young people, high school students from the Roots Youth Movement will talk about their lives, their experiences, their identity, and what being in the Roots Youth Movement has done to change them, to transform them. I also want to tell everyone that for all 4 of the events we've done so far, the Zoom events are now on the Roots website, friendsofroots.net, friendsofroots.net. Go to the resources tab. And lastly, I want to urge everyone to the degree that you're able to donate money to Roots on our website, friendsofroots.net. We really need your help. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week, same time, Monday night at 9 p.m. next week. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled. Thank you, Noor. Thank you, Tamar. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.